Welcome back to CDLA, and I want to talk to you about my first 4 months as a 42-year-old electrical lineman apprentice, greenest of the green. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about job location, training and learning experience, my transition from overhead to underground work, why I actually like underground work. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below. Make sure you like the video so we can reach people around 40 years of age who aspire to be a lineman apprentice. So this is my first month experience as a lineman apprentice. Let's talk about job location. For my first job assignment, I needed to commute 1 hour and 30 minutes away to where the company keeps their trucks and all their equipment. The first job assignment was working with an overhead crew, and when I got switched to working with the underground crew, I got sent to a different location, so then my commute was 1 hour and 15 minutes. The company did offer me an allowance to stay in a hotel, but since the commute is so close to home, I drive it daily. Other apprentices that live further away, they'll work the whole week, stay in the hotel, and then go home on the weekends. My hour and 30 minutes commute can be uncomfortable for some people, but for me, it gives me a chance to reflect on what I did yesterday, think about what I need to do today, and get myself mentally prepared for the task. On my way home, it gives me a chance to think about what I did for the day, finish uploading the information, and decompress at the same time. So as far as my commute goes, it's been a positive experience. Training and learning experience, being the greenest of the green apprentice. Being the greenest of the green apprentice, I'm basically being a groundsman. Typically as a groundsman, your job is to help the people who has more experience than you. The most important thing I learned as a groundsman is you need to anticipate. You need to stay ahead of the crew. You have to anticipate every move of what the crew is thinking. This is at least the goal to become a great groundsman. And to be a great groundsman, you need to anticipate things when it comes to handling tools and materials, site preparation, traffic control, truck maintenance, assisting with repairs, safety observations, and another thing that's very important, what you're basically here for, is learning the basic electrical concepts. Let's break it down. I'm gonna dive into each one by one to get a clear understanding. Remember, I said you need to assist and anticipate. So when it comes to handling material, is handing tools to linemen who's working on poles, or linemen who framing poles, and if they're not framing the poles, you're framing the poles. So let's say a lineman is working on the pole and he needs a hammer. So to anticipate this, you don't want the lineman to say, give me a hammer. You want him to turn and be ready to ask for a hammer, and the hammer's already right there next to his head for him to grab it. So you want to get so good at the groundsman position that when he's reaching for a tool or ready to ask for a tool, it's already right there ready for him to grab it. And this goes for all hardware, including cables, conductors, screws, nuts, bolts, or whatever else they may need. If your crew don't have a traffic control team, you may need to assist with traffic control. You may need to set up cones and, stop traffic or send them through. So this is a small task you might have to do. I really haven't had to do it much. I've did it one time, but most of the time I'm out with the crew on a busy road. They do have a traffic control team, but sometimes you're not able to have this traffic control team because you're not really on a street that's so busy. So you may need to control the traffic. As far as truck maintenance, you may need to load and unload material from the utility truck. You need to set the truck up. Like the company I work for, you have to put a barrier around the truck so that when the guy's working up in the bucket, if a current comes through, you're not accidentally leaning up against the truck and you get electrocuted. You're typically responsible for putting the PTO on so you can let the outriggers down. Outriggers are legs that come down from the truck to keep the truck stable, so when the guy's up in the bucket, if he's in a certain position, the truck will not tip over. You need to put these things we call pads on the ground for the outriggers to sit down on so that the outriggers don't destroy the ground. You need to unload material that the crew needs, whether that's a hammer, sawzall, insulator blankets, insulator guts, drop pins, pole top pins, anything that they may need as far as hardware or equipment they need to fix what they're working on. So when anticipating these needs, you need to have in mind what you're doing on the job or what we're there for, so that when we show up, you can just start grabbing these things without them asking you to, so that you can be ahead of the crew. As far as assisting with repairs, you need to be looking for damaged lines, looking for faults, and once you identify those, you need to be assisting with faults by helping getting the material or whatever you need to fix the fault. You're there for like a second and third eye, so you have to pay attention. For example, if you see a damaged line but the crew don't see it, you need to say, hey, look out for this and look out for that. So you're there for basically to have their back as well. And it don't have to be electrical lines. It could be something as simple as the pole you guys just set in the ground is leaning or crooked one way. So it could be something as simple as that. So this leans into safety observation as well, like letting the crew knows there's a, messed up wire or a trip hazard on the ground, like there's, sticks poking out the ground, or there's a hole in the ground, letting them know things like that, or letting the guy in the bucket know when he's up in the air, stop, hey, you're about to cross this wire, or you're about to run into this wire, things he can't see because he has blind spots. Most importantly, you're there to learn the electrical concepts, so observe as much as you can, ask as many questions as you can, and be as hands-on as possible. And that's the way to learn. Some people, honestly, they're not going to ask you to come learn, so you need to be there looking, watching, and asking questions. A few things I did not mention about being a groundsman is that when you need to hand dig, you will be the one hand digging, or you should be the one hand digging majority of the holes. When they set the pole in the hole, you'll be the one tamming the dirt in. It's this machine that packs the dirt in, and the machine's uncomfortable because you're vibrating. It doesn't have any good handles on it, so it's an uncomfortable task, but that'd be part of your job. That's why they call it grunt work, because you'll be doing most of the heavy lifting and things like that. Also, a few skills I've learned as a groundsman is framing poles and tying knots. Come to find out, tying knots is a very important task. Framing poles is basically, before you put the pole in the air, the pole's laying on the ground, kind of, and you need to build the cross arms on there. You need to build the drop pins inside of there. You need to put the pole top pin on there if needed. If a ground wire is needed, you need to put the ground wire down the pole and staple that in. So you'll learn how to frame poles as a groundsman. And I would say typically this should be a groundsman job. When the pole's on the ground, try to keep the other guys from having to do this. When it comes to tying knots, there are all kinds of knots to learn how to tie. The only thing I really know how to do is a box knot, and I believe I know how to tie a half hitch. But since I don't know a lot of knots at this time, and I haven't been to climbing school just yet, I took a rope home to learn how to tie different knots, because like I said, it's important when a guy's in the air and he needs a tool or he needs something, and you can tie this knot on the thing that he needs and you can wheel it up. And so once it gets to him, he can untie the knot easily without fighting it, and he can have his tool. Also, when you're pulling wire through conduit and underground, if you need to rope it up and pull it through, you have to know these knots to tie. So knot tying is a very important task as a groundsman. One thing I learned about knots is 2 half hitches will hold the world. Don't forget to like the video. I want to talk about transitioning from overhead distribution to underground work. For about my first 3 weeks, I did overhead work and then transferred to do underground work because I was filling in to help a crew for someone who had hurt their back. This job site was in a different location. It was 15 minutes closer to home, so I had a fairly shorter commute. Working with the underground crew being a green apprentice, I thought had a lot of pros. It definitely had its advantages. From what I was hearing, a lot of people don't like underground work, but the reason why I like it is because all the electrical systems is mainly working from the ground. Yes, the electrical systems from the ground do connect to the utilities up above, but with this system being on the ground, the pad mount transformer and the meter, I get to see how these systems are built. I get to understand the electrical work a little bit more in detail. I get to see the primary side, the secondary side. I get to see how the neutral is built in order in comparison to the hot legs, and I get to see how elbows are built. So I get to be more involved with observing how these electrical systems are built, how they are working, and what order they should be done correctly. I should add, as a green apprentice who haven't been to climbing school, I can't go up in the bucket. And I'm not exactly sure once I go to climbing school or anything like that, if I'm allowed to go up in the bucket. It might, I don't know if we have a 1 year grace or 2 year grace. I still need to get information on that. But like I'm saying, being on the underground work, since I can't go up in the sky yet, I get to look at the electrical systems on the ground and have a better understanding of what's going on. So that was my first month as a 42-year-old electrical lineman apprentice, learning a lot of information. And the things that I shared with you is just a few details. There's 1,000 more things that I probably learned or probably even forgot that I haven't shared with you, because you know, being a green apprentice, you're faced with so much information. And what I've also learned and been told by other apprentices and journeymen is once you get your journeyman's card, that's when you start learning. So it takes about 3.5 to 4 years to get your journeyman's. So think about that. What I've also been told is that this is a trade you'll never know everything. If you're going to work in this trade 40 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, you will always learn something new. And that's something I love about the trade. So I have something to look forward to and constantly build and learn these skills. If you're 40 years old or around 40 years old, 35, 40, 42, 45, consider, I did it, you can do it. So it's not too late. And that's my take on it. CDLA, remember, you are the captain of your ship.